Should we learn about window configurations?
It doesn't sound exciting, but it's so important and powerful. It's so important and powerful. I've made sure we had to have a session.
If you want to learn how to make a 64K by 64K rendering with OpenSpace, this session might be for you. We don't talk about that. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
There are no bugs.
OpenSpace is full of features. All right, cool. So let's have a look at some of the window configurations that we can do. As with the other presentations before as well, if you haven't seen them there, the link to the slides is in the Slack. So if you want to go there, you can follow them along. So it's this link. We end up on the starting page, and we are in the configuration file session. No one has a choice, so there's no option, so we're going to go do this one. Cool. All right. So basically, we placed these two talks now before James's, and now this one back to back, in order to have like the duality of like James shows what we can show, and now it's like how we can actually show that on different devices and different resolutions, fisheye, spherical mirror, virtual reality, spherical spheres, and whatever, basically what you want. So James was mentioning it, but I think it's worth highlighting in more detail as well, that OpenSpace is built on another piece of open source software that we're also maintaining, which is called Simple Graphics Cluster Toolkit, or SGCT. It's not really necessary to use in day-to-day work, but it's still, occasionally it pops up in documentations, and particularly if you're dealing with more complicated display environments, it's a term that will come up. It's essentially a library that we're developing to support arbitrary display environments for any kind of graphic applications. OpenSpace being one of them, but there are others that use SGCT as well. So we're developing and maintaining it. There is a GitHub because it's open source, but even more importantly, and that's what I really wanted to highlight here, that it has its own documentation page. Which is useful to know if you start messing around with configuration files, which I hope you all do, once you see what you can actually do with them. So the documentation is at sgct.readthedocs.io. We have a different domain, but it's not enabled yet, so this is the one for now. And it basically goes through all of the different options that you have to configure whatever setting you want to do, which is a lot. Taking one step back and looking at OpenSpace again, essentially we have two different ways of creating these configuration files. So for all of this, a configuration file, think of it as an instruction manual to OpenSpace of like, how do we want to display the thing that we're seeing in OpenSpace? What's the field of view? What's the resolution? How many windows do we have? How many computers do we have? What's the warping mesh that we want to have? A blending, different kinds of projection methods, and so forth. So the two ways that we have to create them, number one, the simple but restricted way is that you can create them in the launcher in OpenSpace. This has support for many of the features that the majority of people are going to use. So that is being able to control what the resolution is, doing fisheye projections, having two windows, one with the GUI, one with the rendering, and so forth. So those can be all set up using a user interface. But it doesn't have all of the features. So if you want to go to all of the features, then you'll need to whip out a configuration file and edit it with a text editor. And that's where the documentation comes in handy. So if you think that you want to do something that the UI doesn't have support for, then it's time to look at the documentation and do it that way. And basically this talk is going to be a lot of examples of what can be done to just spark some ideas. So a whole bunch of different configuration files are already implemented. new can be implemented if you come up with something new, or also configuration files have already been created to make these happen. So in this case, at the bottom we have 5 different examples. On the left, which I think everyone is familiar with, is what we call a flat projection, which is basically just a normal camera with a field of horizontal and vertical field of view. In the center at the top, we have an equirectangular projection. So that would be, if you were to wrap this around a sphere, you would have a complete sphere of that image. So you would basically can use that on a spherical device, for instance. At the bottom is a spherical mirror, which is, you saw that in James' pictures, that basically you have a projector, shiny ball, and you project onto that ball, it bounces off into the dome, and you have a fairly low cost, but still powerful way of presenting in an immersive environment. Next one on the right is a fisheye, so you also call it a dome master, for example, if you want to make a movie. You can either do this interactively or use it with the session recording that you just learned about to make movies for the dome. And then lastly, of course, a vertical for certain video platforms. So if we want to create one, I hope you all have seen this launcher at least once. This is what you could have learned upstairs. So once you get to the launcher, I'm assuming most people just quickly click on the start button and continue on. But in the second option here, we have the window options that we're now going to have a look at. By default, we're looking at the one that James was modifying in the OpenSpace CFG file, but there's a whole bunch of different files that OpenSpace comes with that are already pre-configured to do certain things. But if you don't have a file that you want to do something, there's a way to create a new one. Now, my solutions are pretty limited because I only have one screen. Normally in the top here, if I had multiple screens, multiple screens would show up. I can move things around. Now I just have one. But what we can do is, for example, say we want to have 2 windows. Let's make both of them the same size. So that's the first one. Let's do no window decorations. So there's no way to close it, no little X window. And then we can choose the field of view down here. We can change into fisheye, spherical mirror, cylindrical projection, equirectangular projection, or copying the contents of the previous window. And let's say we have a roll of, let's say 45 degrees. I'll just apply them. And now if we start, you'll see that with just a few clicks, if I were to give a presentation in an auditorium where the audience want to see the user interface, I would now have 2 windows. I can drag one over. You can pre-configure where they're actually being located, and OpenSpace is just doesn't really know anything about this. So now we have one window that the audience can see, and one window for me to interact with just a few clicks. And you can also see that this one doesn't have any window decoration. This one does. So can get rid of this, and now we just have one window left. So very, very simple to do, very easy things. You can also save these. These are all saved as JSON files, so fairly easy to edit with a text editor. So if you make some mistakes, you can just easily fix them with an editor as well, or edit them if so inclined. Here's for everyone else looking at the slides afterwards what we just did. And then basically you can store these into your user folder. There are basically 2 places where configurations come from. One of them is the config folder. Those are configuration files that we have created that we think people might be interested in, which are the ones that don't have anything before them in the name in this drop-down menu. And then there's the one that have a little OpenSpace green U, which are the user ones. So in this case, these are all of the ones that I have created at some point for some reason. I'm not really good at naming them, so I don't know what half of these are actually doing anymore. But these ones, you can create them, share them, and what's really powerful, to tie it back to James' presentation, the session recordings that you record don't actually care about the window configuration. So you can create a session recording on a flat screen and then render it out in a 32 by 32K fisheye rendering without a problem at all. Like, it's just like OpenSpace is like oblivious to what the actual rendering is. Same thing with stereoscopic rendering or any other format, or mix and match them if you want to. Okay, so one of the things we wanted to look at is equirectangular. So we have one that is equirectangular GUI. The ones that we normally call underscore GUI are two windows. One of them shows the user interface, the other one shows the actual rendering. In this case, they're actually right behind each other. Any point, initialization is done. There we go, we're back here. So we have our UI window that we can control things with. And we have an equirectangular one that, were to wrap it around, for instance, a sphere, or this is also very common for virtual reality. So if you want to make VR videos, this is the input format into many of the video editing tools, for instance. So, as I said, this is one of the few ones that have been created already. Another one that I'm not going to start now is a single fisheye. I think everyone has seen fisheye images, I'm assuming. You can control what the resolution is, what the internal resolution is. So it's all a bit of a tweak between what you're actually trying to achieve and what the capabilities of the software are. But I want to start with this one. So let's start modifying things. Can copy. It's this one, and we'll save it into my. I'm going to be bad, and I'm saving it into the config folder, which you shouldn't do. Do what I say, not do what I do. Now my user folder is in a completely different location, and it would be a pain to navigate there. So if we start that, while it's starting, I'll open it up in the editor again to just quickly and briefly run through what this is. So this is now 46 lines of JSON. Some of the things we can skip over, but essentially what we're doing is we're defining nodes. So nodes are individual computers. So for example, if you're running in a planetarium with 6 projectors and 6 computers, you would have 6 nodes in here, 1 for each computer. And then each computer uses the same configuration file. It picks out which portion of it needs based on the IP address, and then sets everything up from there. For each node, we have any number of windows. So this is one of the restrictions that the user interface has. We can only create 4 windows from the user interface because we think that that's probably good enough for everyone. But SGCT doesn't have that restriction. I mean, theoretically, there's a limitation of 65,000 windows, but I think at that point you're going to have other problems. But theoretically, it's possible at least. And then within each window, there can be multiple viewports. So basically, think of it as every window can be carved up into different portions that can each have their own configuration. As a concrete example, in our dome where we have stereoscopic rendering, we have one window that is split. The left part is the left eye, the right part is the right eye. And then that gets fed to the projectors that project it correctly into the dome. And for each viewport, we can then configure where it is. In this case, it's positioned at 0, 0. It has a size of 1, 1, so it's covering the entire window. And we have a planar projection that has a horizontal field of view of 80 degrees and a vertical field of view of 50 degrees. And that gets us essentially this rendering. If we were to modify that, let's say, for example, I'm a crazy person. Let's do 45 degrees roll, and now we have a vertical field of view of only 5 degrees. So something else we want to try. Yeah, let's make the image only 75% of the size. So now, I hope I saved. But if that works, now we're going to see basically the whole rendering is tilted by 45 degrees. The vertical field of view is going to be awful, but we're only going to have 75% on the left side of it. Oh, I did Y, so it's the top part. So, not sure why you would want to do this. But that's also not kind of the point. Like, I just want to show that everything is possible to do. Like, you can, this one is now a symmetrical field of view, but you can have an asymmetrical field of view as well if you want to have a different center point, if you don't want to have it in the center of the screen. And the configuration, documentation is your friend in this regard. Let me reset all of this back to how it was before. Because one of the other things I want to show is the last two things that I want to show before we head up to the dome is in the window there is a option for stereo. So there are a whole bunch of different options on how to render stereoscopic images. I'm just taking anaglyph red cyan. There we go. Paste it in here. And now this is literally the only change that I made. If we now start it again, once we have started, we'll see that all of OpenSpace is now rendered in stereo. And if you were to have stereo glasses, which I'm assuming no one brought, you will be able to see it in stereo. And the nice thing is now if we were to play back a session recording or take pictures, we now get one picture for the left eye, one picture for the right eye. And we can do with it whatever you want. Might have made some mistake, but it should be in stereo.
Alex, I think you launched the wrong thing.
I launched the wrong thing. Okay, but everyone can picture red cyan stereoscopic images. Because the last thing that I want to show is what I was teasing earlier. Like, let's say we want to make a fisheye. This is a flat screen. Two windows to make a fisheye. So what we can do is take the single fisheye that already exists, copy and paste it in here. You can see it's a fisheye with a 1K internal resolution, set to 2K. And now where we have the size, so normally now it would create a 1K by 1K fisheye, which might be good for interactive purposes, but let's say we want to have an internal resolution of 8K by 8K. Really sorry for my computer. But we now load it up. It's going to be running really, really slow. But the benefit is that now if any screenshot that I'm taking is going to be at 8K by 8K. Again, by default, you wouldn't really want to do it this way and fly interactively because the computer is not going to be able to generate that many frames. But one of the ways that we generated our Dome movie, for example, is to record the session recording in a 1K by 1K resolution. You switch out the configuration file, and then you play back the session recording at a high resolution. Because at that point, you don't really care anymore. Like if you get only 2 frames per second, like so be it. Like it's just rendering overnight instead of in the afternoon. So now, okay, now it's actually 50 FPS, which is not that bad actually. And this is now one of the things where OBS wouldn't really help you anymore, because OBS would still record at the 1K resolution that your screen can do. But now, because it's internal resolution, if I press F12, we would now have a screenshot that is 8K in resolution. So there are many other options. You can overlay PNGs. You can have blend masks to blend out portions of the screen, to have like a black square in the middle where you have a second projector that you want to project on, for example. There's so many options, and do talk to us if you want to try something weird. But otherwise, there is the documentation that is pretty good at going through everything. And also, the last thing is there. To go through projections. Let's take the fisheye. They do have examples with images of how it would look like to be inside of our example cube looking out. So that's quite useful to see as well. Cool. And I think now it's time for the dome. If there are any questions. Yes?
I'm really interested in being able to view OpenSpace through my VR headset. I specifically use a valve index, and I've spent a little bit of time trying to get like configuration files up for it. With some fighting and dark magic, I've been able to get it to something where I can get different views in each eye, but I can't really get the like camera positions to make sense. And I also don't know how I could like replace the key bindings with any sort of head position indication, because it doesn't really work if you can't like, control your camera location with your head, you just get sick. So I was wondering if like I've heard that OpenSpace has had in some VR implementations for a long time, and obviously like that's been moving around a lot. I feel like I'm doing it wrong. What I'd love is for everything to be able to magically connect through OpenXR, because I think that's probably going to be a good long-term standard. But I was just wondering, like, where are things at with that? What are people doing? What do you recommend?
Yep. Just repeating the question. Basically, it's what's the deal with VR, and it doesn't work properly.
Yeah, that's the gist.
Yeah. So as you correctly, like there used to be support using OpenVR. That worked 8-9 years ago, and then it died 7 or 8 years ago because no one was maintaining it, and just stuff dissipates.
So it's VR.
Huh?
So it's VR.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So basically, it's been one of the very highly requested features to have VR support, because it would be really cool. If someone has funding around for a developer, I'm more than happy to help in any way possible to make that happen, because it would be really cool. We have like a bunch of virtual reality headsets at our place as well that we would love to use. Right now, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just right now there is no way for the camera position to be properly recorded into SGCT again. It used to be a protocol called VRPN, which I forgot what it was standing for. But that was basically like a protocol to send positions of camera and orientation of camera into other applications, which was supported by SGCT, but that support also died away. So there's probably on the order of 3 to 6 months of work to get it up and running again. Then how to deal with the user interface, that's a whole other question, which also probably would want to deal with it at the same time. So having the UI that we have on a floating panel to pick things, for example, which would be really cool. But yeah, right now it's unfortunately the pre-rendered videos, and outputting it is probably the only way to really do it, and then you get pretty low resolution to look at, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Let's check out.
All right. So sorry to cut configuration questions short. Save your questions, put them on the bike rack, jot down a note. We are headed to the planetarium now. So if you brought your own laptop and you want to take it with you, pack it up. Or else we can stop by after the dome, but we will be in there until 7. So up to you. And we will head that way. Yes, if you borrowed a laptop, you can just leave it where it is.